This is the Week in Sustainability from Sustain.Life. It's where our team of sustainability experts and practitioners share commentary to keep you up to date on developing stories and news.
Hi, I'm Hannah Sofsky, Sustainability Data Analyst at Sustain.Life. Today I'm joined by Drew Slade, our Revenue Ops Manager. For the benefit of our audience, would you mind telling us about what you do here?
Sure. So I work across marketing, sales, and our customer success team to help us better understand the needs of our customer, create a simple sales process, and just enable our team to do what they do best. I used to work on editing this podcast in the early days, and now I'm on the other side. So glad to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited that you're here. We're going to be talking about Ember's recently published mid-year insights into the global power industry. But to start off, we promised to cover updates on previous stories when they happen, and we have a big one. So, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed SB 253 and SB 261 into law on Saturday. These are reporting requirements that are set to start in 2026. So, SB 263 will require public disclosures of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions from any companies doing business in California with revenue over $1 billion. Then SB 261 requires businesses to disclose climate related financial risk from any company doing business in California, revenue over $500 million.
So while we're still waiting for a similar rule to come down from the SEC, these California bills cast a wider net. The SEC rule will only apply to public companies and not every reporter will be required to disclose scope 3 emissions. So glad to hear that update. What does Ember have to say about the power sector in the first half of 2023?
Yeah. So Ember took in global electricity generation data from January to June of this year and assessed change from the same period in prior years. And to back up a little bit, we know that in order to limit global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, the global power sector needs to meet net zero emissions by 2035. So in order for this to happen, we have to reach a point where power sector emissions, stop increasing, hit a peak, and start to decline towards zero. Ember's report essentially explained that we're teetering really close to that turning point and then sort of broke into the global trends that could take us to the other side of that peak.
Okay, that's exciting. So in general, I know renewables are becoming more affordable and fossil fuels are kind of on the decline. If this report says we might be at that turning point, then that must be true. So did you see what you expected in the report?
Yeah, overwhelmingly, yes. Renewables have continued. Wind and solar are growing like they have continuously for the past decade. Global wind and solar generation increased by 12%, while fossil fuel generation only increased by 0.1%. 50 different countries bested their own personal records for solar generation, which is great to see. So we're not moving at the necessary speed. Point blank, we're just not going as quickly as we need to go. But renewable generation growth beating fossil fuel generation is good.
Yeah, that's great to see wind and solar on the rise. So kind of carrying on the renewable space, hydropower is the oldest renewable power source. So what trends are you seeing with that?
Yeah. It was a tough year for hydropower, and that 0.1% growth in fossil fuel generation turns out to be directly connected to hydropower losses this year. China leads the world in hydropower generation. They have for decades, and we've also seen that China was hit really hard with heat waves and droughts this year. These conditions reduced hydro generation by so much that global hydro generation went down 8.5%. With high demand and less electricity provided by hydro, China was forced to fill that gap with coal. And so, Ember is calling this hydropower loss like a warning shot that could impact the speed of the entire energy transition.
Well, and so what about the full picture of power sector emissions then? So like with the energy mix changing, what did power sector emissions look like this year compared to last year?
Mhm. Zooming out, Ember is putting forth this idea that we are really close to crossing that moment of peak power sector emissions. So since 2000, the only times that we've seen power sector emissions decrease rather than increase has been one, 2009 in recovery from the financial crisis, and two, 2019 and 2020 with COVID-19. This year we saw a historically small increase. I mean, it was 0.02% of emissions increased total. So, that's a really tiny increase, and it would have been a decrease if hydropower had generated as expected and coal hadn't been needed to fill the gap. That hit to hydropower was an early consequence of a changing climate, and renewable projects need to accelerate to pretty dramatically to get us to our goals.
You sound overall optimistic. Renewables are being deployed and going online, and it's making a real difference in our overall energy mix. We just need to grow and stay aggressive.
Right? That's a perfect note to wrap up on. Thank you, Drew, for joining the Week in Sustainability, and thank you to our audience for joining us. As always, see you next week.
Sustain.Life is the leading and most comprehensive sustainability software on the market. To learn how we can help your company measure its emissions and take climate action, go to Sustain.Life. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this show on our YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.